right, class, this is chapter 11. We're going to review. Chapter 11 is on the nervous system. So the nervous system, as we talked about in class, it is made up of the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. That is all of the other nerve networks, all of these nerves outside of the brain and the spinal cord. You have your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord again. Peripheral nervous system is divided into two divisions. The sensory or afferent division carries signals from the nerve endings to the central nervous system. Okay, so if you want to think of it from your fingertips to your brain, it's the sensory afferent division. You have two subdivisions. You have your somatic sensory and your visceral sensory. Your somatic carries signals from your skin, your bones, your joints, and your muscles. And then your visceral carries from your heart, your lungs, your stomach, and your bladder. The motor or efferent division transmits information from the central nervous system to the rest of the body. So you have your somatic motor and you have your autonomic. So your somatic motor, that allows voluntary motions or voluntary movements of your skeletal muscle. Remember, your skeletal muscle is the only muscle that's voluntary. Okay, the other two types of muscle tissue are involuntary. Autonomic motor, automatic, if you think of the word automatic, this provides activities such as control of your blood pressure and heart rate. Now, this autonomic nervous system is yet again broken down into two other divisions. You have your sympathetic division. This arouses the body for action, and the parasympathetic has a calming effect. So the sympathetic at times is called the fight or flight. You can think of it that way. The parasympathetic division has a calming effect. Okay, you can see it says, because the nervous system performs so many functions, it is helpful to further divide in the peripheral nervous system as shown. So you can see that there's two main systems, but again, they're broken down by piece by piece by piece. So you're going to need to know the sensory and the motor, but the primary thing that I want you to focus on is the motor, the parasympathetic, and the sympathetic. So this part down here to the right on the screen.
Welcome back to our lesson on the nervous system. In this video, we introduce the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. We will talk about the structure of the PNS, including its major subdivisions. In addition, we'll cover how its sensory and motor functions work together in a cyclical process to create the reflex arc. Great, so let's begin. In the human body, there are 31 pairs of nerves that branch from the spinal cord, and 12 pairs that emerge from the brain. Collectively, these 43 nerve pairs are considered separate from the brain and spinal cord, and therefore they form the base structure of the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is made up of two types of neurons: sensory neurons, also known as afferent neurons, and motor neurons, also known as efferent neurons. As their names suggest, Sensory neurons detect various sensations, such as pain and heat. These neurons transmit messages toward the central nervous system in order to be interpreted by either the spinal cord or by the brain. Motor neurons do the opposite. They transmit messages away from the central nervous system to other areas of the body. This is to stimulate effectors such as the skin, sense organs, or muscles to perform a function or reflex. Note that all 43 pairs of nerves in the PNS perform either sensory, motor, or mixed functions. This neurological circuit of information that includes sensory detection, interpretation of sensory input, and a resulting motor output is called the reflex arc. As sensory information comes in, it passes through ganglia, which are collections of sensory neurons soma. The ganglia send these signals into the dorsal section of the spine, where the information gets processed. After the CNS processes this information, it gets sent out from the ventral section of the spine via the motor neurons. The motor neurons then carry the processed response towards the effectors. The peripheral nervous system also has two separate divisions based on voluntary and involuntary responses or reflexes. Voluntary responses are consciously controlled, whereas involuntary responses are unconsciously controlled. The somatic nervous system is the PNS division that controls voluntary responses. It is also responsible for relaying sensory and motor information between the outside environment and the CNS. This is due to the fact that most somatic nerves innervate outer sections of the body, such as the skin and skeletal muscles. Hence, any muscle movement or voluntary motor output uses the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the peripheral nervous system division that handles involuntary movement. It generally innervates our internal organs, and it controls the vital functions that keep us alive. Most importantly, it controls our heart rate, it controls our respiration, and it controls our digestion. All of these and many other internal processes happen without our conscious control due to the autonomic division. Lastly, there are two subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Each of these subdivisions perform opposite functions to maintain internal balance. The sympathetic nervous system is what is called our fight or flight response system, that when stimulated, causes general alertness and excitement. It's the body's way of responding to a perceived threat. The parasympathetic nervous system is the opposite. It's our body's rest and digest response system. Basically, this means that a parasympathetic response generally restores the body to a calm or restful state. This concludes our discussion on the peripheral nervous system. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to our lesson.
Okay, so we discussed in class the three types of neurons. You have your sensory afferent neurons, which the video talked about as well. These detect your stimuli, such as heat, okay, or something sharp. Your interneurons, they connect pathways, and your motor or afferent neurons, these relay messages. Your neuron structure, you have your cell body here, okay, at the very top, and then you have your dendrites. These receive information from the axon of another neuron. You have your axon here, and then you have your synaptic knob. This synaptic knob is what transmits information from the end of the axon to the other dendrite from another neuron. From another neuron. Okay, so your axon is covered in myelin sheaths. So these purple are myelin sheaths that allow for insulation of the axon. You'll see these little openings in the axon, and these are called nodes of Ranvier. Those nodes allow for the electrical stimulus, the information to skip down the axon much more quickly and get to the synaptic knob, which will allow information to go to the next neuron. You have your spinal cord. That's part of the central nervous system. Again, it's divided into the same wording as when we talked about the vertebrae. So you have your cervical, your thoracic, and your lumbar. There's similar amounts of nerves in each area. The cervical has 8 nerves. Okay, spinal nerves. Thoracic has 12. Lumbar has 5. The sacral has 5. And the coccygeal has 1.
The brain is the command center for the entire body. It makes us who we are. It receives information from our senses and controls our thoughts and movement. To better explore this incredibly complex organ, scientists have divided it into parts and regions. The largest part is the cerebrum, which is divided into 2 sides called hemispheres, just like the Earth. The outer layer is known as the cortex, which is Latin for bark. Like a tree's bark, the surface is only 1/8 inch thick, but it also contains millions of cells with fibers that send messages to other brain areas. More than 2/3 of the surface of the cortex hides in hundreds of little folds that make the wiggly visible lines on the brain. Animals that are less intelligent have a smoother brain surface. The cortex is divided into 4 regions. The frontal lobe is for personality and emotions, higher thinking skills like problem solving and controlling movement. It continues to develop until you're in your mid-20s. The temporal lobe helps process your hearing and other senses, and helps with language and reading. The parietal lobe is involved with your senses, attention, and language. The occipital lobe helps your eyes see, including recognition of shapes and colors. The thalamus in the center of the brain relays sensory and motor information to the cortex and helps with consciousness, sleep, and alertness. 12 pairs of cranial nerves carry information from your senses to and from the brain and body. Lower in the brain we find the cerebellum, which plays a key role in motor control, coordination, and spatial navigation, so we can find our way out of a maze, for example. Underneath is the brainstem, which connects the brain to the spinal cord, a nerve pathway that runs all the way down your back, sending and receiving information from your senses. The brainstem includes the pons, which helps control our breathing, and the medulla oblongata, which regulates our heart and other body reflexes like vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing. The limbic system, a region under the cortex, processes our emotions and drives. It contains the brain's reward circuit, which releases the chemical dopamine, making us feel pleasure. The anticipation of pleasure motivates us to repeat important human behaviors like eating, having fun with friends, or falling in love. But it also encourages us to repeat risky behaviors like taking drugs. Drugs signal the brain to release unusually strong amounts of dopamine. This flood of dopamine causes the high that drug users seek and makes it difficult to enjoy more normal, simple pleasures. Repeated activation of this reward pathway can lead to addiction. The limbic system includes the amygdala, which processes emotions, and the hippocampus in the temporal lobe, which is like a memory indexer that sends memories to certain parts of the brain for storage and retrieves them when you need them. The brain controls many actions through rapid nerve impulses, but there are some body functions that the brain modulates over many hours or days by secreting hormones via special glands like the hypothalamus, which wakes you up in the morning and gets the adrenaline flowing, like during a test or athletic event. The pituitary gland, often called the master gland, which helps control growth, body temperature, pregnancy, and childbirth. And the tiny pineal gland, which helps to control sleep and circadian rhythms. These are just a few of the parts and functions of the beautiful, amazing, and complex human brain.
Okay, so I wanted to post a video before we go over what's in your book. So the cerebrum, again, is the major, large part of the brain, largest region. The cerebellum is the smaller region. The brainstem has the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So those are the main structures that you need to know.